Maxwell, who's reading the same text I am, and somehow decides these sons of God that he may or may not be happy with, that the fact that they have power here on earth, but they're here nonetheless, and he'll serve them to the best of his ability.
Just in case you think Frank is off base here with saying that Maxwell is planning on serving these beings to the best of his ability, watch this clip of Jordan Maxwell detailing his experience with these aliens. And notice that he goes back and basically makes a deal with them and says he will do whatever they want him to do. They will channel through him. And this is later confirmed by a psychic when he told nobody about it, that they listened and agreed that they would use him and channel through him. They even told him they are Pleiadians and that he too is also Pleiadian and he is here to be their emissary. For those of you familiar with the work of people like Guy Malone, Dr. Michael Heiser, David Flynn, Joe Jordan, Stan Deyo, this experience will be very evident what is at play here and what's happening. Read Michael Heiser's book, The Facade, or check out on Google Video any of the Ancient of Days conference videos. It is crucial to understanding who and what these beings are, because it is my view they are the New World Order. That is why the New World Order is so hard to track down and pinpoint who's behind what. It's because who's really running the show are multidimensional entities. And after a lot of study, I feel they are not from the Pleiades.
Okay, so we drive out maybe a mile, if that, and all of a sudden I got a very overwhelming sensation that we've done something wrong. And it was extremely powerful feeling I had. That it was very. I have felt this feeling at other times, and I was right. So I said, I don't know what we're doing here, but I'm getting out of here because there's something going on, and I feel it, and I don't like it. I want to get out of here. And I stopped the car, and I backed it up and turned it around, and we were only out of the car more than maybe a minute at the most. And all of a sudden, just north of us, the cloud began to open up in like a little bit of an oval, began to kind of open up. The size that the moon would appear in the nighttime sky. Two white glowing objects came in very slow. They were not flying as such. They appeared to be just electronically or magnetically floating. And as they floated overhead, 5 more came in behind them. And at that point, I totally went ballistic. I was absolutely, and I don't mind admitting it, totally frightened, because I have never seen this kind of awesome beauty that radiated fear. But if you are like a child, a small child taken to a zoo and brought up to the cage of a gorilla, the overwhelming fear that grips a child, that's the kind of fear I felt. They began to move over our heads and began to change places as if they were doing some sort of a little routine to show us what they could do. And they radiate, and that's something you need to remember. They radiated a fear off of them. You could feel it. You're in the presence of something awesome, fearful. And I grew up from about the age of 7 or 8 having otherworld experiences. All of my life I have been involved in otherworld experiences. For whatever reason. And I have experienced many things as a teenager and as a child and even in adult years that were just startling things. Nothing compared to this. Nothing. So I got in the car and I cranked the engine, and they got in the car because they realized I was serious. And so they rolled the windows down and leaned out the window backwards so that they could watch while I'm driving away. And I tore out to the highway. When I did, Paul sitting in the back seat, Ivy in the front seat, leaning out the window backwards, they went totally ballistic to each other. They started screaming uncontrollably to each other, yelling, screaming at the top of their voice at each other. And what was happening is all 7 of these beautiful things came right down over the top of the car, zoom, right down over us. I wasn't seeing. I just saw a couple of them moving around, and they were moving quickly. And I looked out, and I could see them moving around, and I thought, my God, we were in trouble. Now it's not just that we saw them. They know we're here, and they're following us. They were telling me that what the 7 of these disc-shaped things were doing, they would come together in a circle without touching each other, but all of this in a second. They would come together in a circle and blow out into a 7-pointed star, come together in a circle, blow out into a 7-pointed, back and forth, and they followed us out at 90 miles an hour. They were doing that, following us out, just that way, just that quick. That kind of technology we don't have. The next morning, I got up late. I went over to the restaurant. Paul and Ivy had already gotten up and gone over to the restaurant, and they were having breakfast and talking to the townspeople. And they had a big group of people around the table, and they were talking about experience. So when I walked into the restaurant, I thought that what they were talking about is the experience the 3 of us had had the night before. But they were talking about what happened to them last night in the motel room. Paul said that he, about a half hour to 45 minutes, something like that, after he fell asleep, he woke up totally awake, and something picked him up. Actually picked him up and set him up in bed involuntarily. And the moment he sat up, a light came on over his head like a little dim night light. And he looked up to see an alien's face with the typical alien's face with the bubble eyes, but it was glowing, and you could see through it. You could see the ceiling through it, as if it were a hologram of some kind. And it was glowing, looking at him, and he said it slid across the ceiling, went across the ceiling, hit the wall, and came down to where it was even with him sitting in bed. And at that moment, in his head, he began to see the room going in circles. He could see the window behind him going around, the door going around. The room was moving in circles. Obviously, it was some sort of an optical thing that was happening. And he said, but the face stood still while the room began to rotate. But Ivy, in my room, was laying so that she could see the door. And she said she saw the glowing on the wall, but she couldn't tell what the light was because it wasn't very bright. And she said, but when she opened her eyes to see the glowing of the light in Paul's room, which was the face on the wall, a little red, tiny little red dot of light came through Paul's room and came in and hovered over her. A little red, tiny light, which incidentally is in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters. Every time you saw the saucers go by, you saw this little light going around. Ivy said she saw this little light come in and hover right above her, and at that moment she was totally paralyzed. Couldn't move, couldn't cry out, couldn't do anything. All she could do is breathe and just. And she said she laid there totally paralyzed, looking at this light, and when the glowing went through the wall, that little red light went out and followed it. It was gone. Now, I slept through all of this. I didn't see any of it. I'm just telling you what they said. But I know them, and they're not given to making up stories, either one of them. And so I said to them at the time in the restaurant, I said, well, they didn't wake me. And Pat, the owner of the restaurant, she said, no, they know who you are. They just wanted to know who your companions were.